Okay, our next video that we are going to have for today is a review from Chapter 8 of Factoring. I'll do a couple of them with you, and then we'll have some that you can practice on to make sure that we understand the process of what we're doing. First one here, we're looking at our A and our C first. We can first look and see if they are perfect squares. In this case, 4 is a perfect square, but 3 is not a perfect square, so we have to factor it out. So we're going to look at 4 times 3 because our A times C, that gives me a positive 12. Okay, I look at my B term, and since this is negative, I know both of my factors either need to be both positive or both negative. Again, this is negative, so I know both of my factors need to be negative. If you need to go out and list all of your factors, you can. Some of you are going to be able to see it a lot faster and not need to list all of your factors. Again, now finding the sums of these, this gives me a negative 13 when I add it up. This gives me a negative 8, and this gives me a negative 7. I need my two factors to add up to give me a negative 8, and in this case it is negative 2 and negative 6. Now I'm going to break up my B term, so I'm going to have 4v squared minus 2v minus 6v plus 3. Again, it does not matter if you put the 6v here or the 2v here. You can put them in either order. Now I'm going to group these two terms and look at this first one and see what I can pull out. So I have a 4v squared minus 2v. Well, I can pull out of a 2, out of a 4 and a 2, and I can pull out a v out of both of these. So my greatest common factor between 4v squared and negative 2v would be a 2v. I then divide it out. 4 divided by 2 is 2. V squared divided by v is v. I'm going to take negative 2 divided by negative 2, gives me a negative 1. And v divided by v, I have taken that v out, so I'm left with 2v minus 1. I look at my next one of a negative 6v plus 3. Anytime this first term is negative, you're always going to pull out a negative. So I can pull out a negative, and between a 6 and a 3, I can pull out a negative 3. Again, this one does not have a v term, so I'm not going to pull the v out. So I can just pull out a negative 3. I divide negative 6 by negative 3 to get a positive 2. I didn't do anything with the v, so I leave it. Positive 3 divided by negative 3 gives me a negative 1. Again, we look, these two need to be the same, and if they are, then you know you've done it correct. My answer is that, 2v minus 1, and then my other answer is the two things that I have factored out. So 2v minus 3. Okay. When A is 1, okay, it makes it a lot easier. Again, I can look at this. Is this a perfect square? No, so I still need to factor it out. I'm going to go 1 times 50, and I get a positive 50. Again, I look at my middle term here. This is negative, so I know both of my factors need to be negative. Okay, it is a negative 5 times negative 10. Again, if you need to list your factors out, you can. When A is 1, I don't have to break down my B term. Okay, I can just write my answer as A minus 5 and A minus 10. Again, if you do break your B term out and do the same grouping like we did over here, you'll still get the same thing. It's just a little bit more work. So if your A is 1, whatever your two factors you come up with, you can just write those as your answers. Let's practice one more of these. So we're going to go 3 times a negative 5. Again, we look at both those. Those are not perfect squares. So 3 times a negative 5, negative 15. Now, since I have a negative, I know one is going to be positive. One of my factors is positive. One of my factors is negative. Since my B is positive, I know that my larger factor needs to be positive. So I'm going to go a negative 1, positive 15, negative 3, positive 5. I need to end up with a positive 2, so these would be my factors, a negative 3x and a 3v and a 5v. So now I break down this B term to get 3v squared minus 3v plus 5v minus 5. I then go through and I group them. And I look, what can I pull out of a 3v squared minus 3v? I can take out a 3, and they both have a v, so I can take out a 3v. 3v squared divided by 3v is just 1v. I'm just going to write v. Negative 3 divided by 3 is a negative 1. I've divided that v out, so I'm left with negative 1. I look at 5v minus 5. I can take out a 5. I highly recommend that you write plus 5 because you're taking out a positive 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. I didn't do anything with the v, so I leave it, so I have 1v. Negative 5 divided by 5 is a negative 1. Again, I look at these. They are the same. I know that I have factored it correctly. So my answer is going to be 3v plus 5 and v minus 1. If you need to pause the video to get caught up and get all this copied down, you may do so. Okay, moving on, you have 3 practice problems here. I'm going to recommend that you pause the video, factor this first one, and then come back and I will help you make sure that you got the correct answer. So if you look, 4 times 6, 6 is not a perfect square, so we have to factor them. 4 times 6 is 24. They are both going to be positive since this is a positive here. I'm looking at what factors of 24 give me 11. That is a 3 and an 8. So I break down my b term. 4n squared plus 3n plus 8n plus 6. Now I group my little terms. 4n squared plus 3n. There's nothing that I can take out of a 4 and a 3 other than a 1. This has an n squared and this has an n, so I can take out an n. If I divide an n out of 4n squared, I'm just left with 4n. If I divide an n out of 3n, I'm just left with 3. Looking at 8n plus 6, I can take out a 2. Again, a positive 2, so I'm going to write plus 2. This one doesn't have an n, so I can't take out an n. 8 divided by 2 is 4. I didn't do anything with the n. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Again, both these terms are the same. My answer is n plus 2 and 4n plus 3. Again, I would pause the video again, do this next problem over here, and then go ahead and hit play when you are finished to make sure that you got the correct answer. I multiply my a times c, so 1 times negative 14 gives me a negative 14. I want to know the factors of negative 14. That gives me a positive 5. One has to be positive, one has to be negative. So it's a negative 2, positive 7. I break down my middle terms. N squared minus 2n plus 7n minus 14. I then group my terms. I can divide an n out of this first one. I'm left with n minus 2. And I can take a 7 out of the second one. So I'm left with n minus 2. Again, they are the same. So I have n plus 7, n minus 2. Again, notice my a was 1, so I could have just said my answers was this. I could have just went straight to this step right here. I just wanted to show you that you'd still get the same thing if you do break down your b term. Go ahead and pause the video and do your last problem and then hit play when you're finished. So now I multiply 3 times 10 to get a positive 30. I look at what factors are going to add to give me 11. That is a 5 and a 6. Breaking down my b term, 3p squared plus 5p plus 6p plus 10. I go in and group them. This first one I can't take anything out of a 3 and a 5, but I can take a p out. So 3p squared divided by p is just 3p. 5p divided by p just gives me a 5. I look at 6p plus 10. I can take a 2 out of this, a positive 2. I'm left with 3p plus 5 when I divide that out. They are the same thing in the middle here, so I know I have done that correct. So I have p plus 2 and 3p plus 5. Hopefully we got the correct answer on all 3 of those. Okay, so now go ahead and write any questions that you may still have over factoring. That's fine. If you have questions, make sure that you write them down. That way in class the next day you can ask these questions.